Cool. So today within the webinar, we're going to have a look at some of the highlights from our behaviour and safety report. We're going to we're going to show the interview that we had earlier this week with Sam Strickland, where we were chatting about behaviour policies and practice at Dustin School. And we'll also have a look at some of the free resources that are available and out there to support with the creation and practice around behaviour policies and school practices. So first, we're going to pop a poll into the chat to see what best describes your reasons for joining the webinar today. There are a few answers to that one. So I think that one is due to pop up shortly. There we go. So for instance, we've got behaviour is generally good, but I'd like to learn how to improve our behaviour policies and practices. We are looking to build on our behaviour policies and practices. We conducted stakeholder surveys, and behaviour is a focus area. We face regular disruptive behaviour in our schools, or schools, and are looking for advice. So if you could answer the poll, if you get the chance. A couple more seconds. Amazing. There we go. So we can see from that most people are responding. 41% of us today are saying that behaviour is generally good, but we'd like to learn how to improve some of our behaviour practices in school. And there's a nice spread of some of the others. There's also some that are looking to build on their existing behaviour policies and practices. So within the webinar today, we will get the chance to look at how we can build on some of our existing practices. And the interview with Sam is particularly interesting. It will give some more light on some of the sector examples of what Sam and those do at Dustin School. Amazing. So what we are going to start off by doing is going through some of the key takeaways from our behaviour and safety report, which highlights some of the key trends and challenges from our national data sets. So the report itself looks at over 400,000 perspectives from school staff, pupils and parents. So we take data from our three large data sets for the pupil learning experience and wellbeing survey, our staff experience and wellbeing survey, and our parental engagement survey, and combine those to have a 360 view of perspectives surrounding behaviour and safety in English schools. So things we've learned, I've separated the findings in this section into two areas. First, we're going to have a look at the pupils, and then we're going to have a look at the staff. If you'd like to have a look at the parent perspectives, then I recommend downloading the report and having a look at those, because we won't be covering them on the webinar today, but it's definitely something to have a read of and have a look into if that's something you're interested in looking at further. So we're going to start by having a look at some of the things we learned for pupils. So one of the questions we ask pupils in our pupil wellbeing survey, pupil experience and wellbeing survey, is how often is learning disrupted because of someone's behaviour? So 42% of pupils in 2023 reported feeling their learning was disrupted very or quite often by someone's behaviour. You can see that only around 27% of pupils there reported rarely or never having their learning disrupted. We also ask in the pupil experience and wellbeing survey, how happy are pupils to be studying at school? In this graph here, we've shown the responses by the responses to the question, how often do you behave well in class? So for pupils that reported always or very often / quite often behaving well in class, they were more likely to report feeling very happy or quite happy to be studying at the school, whereas pupils who sometimes, rarely or never reported that they sometimes, rarely or never behave well in class were more likely to report that they were not very happy or not happy at all to be studying in their schools. We, following on from that kind of the well-being theme of in response to some of the behaviour data, we also asked pupils in our pupil well-being survey, how safe do you feel during class? So as we know, feelings of safety are very much interlinked with behaviour and safeguarding, and only 65% of pupils reported feeling very or quite safe this year. Well, last academic year, 2022, 2023. 10% of pupils reported feeling not very safe or not safe at all. So that's 1 in 5 pupils reporting that they were feeling not very safe or not safe at all. And if we scale that up to a classroom, that's 3 children on average on a class of 30. So moving on from pupils, if you have any questions about any of the data or things that I'm sharing today, please feel free to pop any questions in the chat, and I'll try my best to answer them as we go through. If not, there will be some time at the end for some discussion about some of the findings or things we go through in the thing today. What I'm going to do now is have a look at some of the data from our report surrounding how staff perspectives on pupil behaviour. So we ask a very similar question in our staff experience and wellbeing surveys we do in our pupil experience and wellbeing survey, but rather than it being how often is their learning disrupted by pupil behaviour, it's how often is your work disrupted by pupil behaviour. As we can see from the graph here, classroom disruption has increased by 12% since 2020, 2021, which we know from that year, that was the year most heavily impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. If we look at that in the wider context of the last 5 years, we can see that it's roughly returned back to pre-pandemic levels. So in 2018, 2019, 32% of staff reported finding their work being disrupted constantly or often. But in 2022, 2023, we see around 37% of staff now reporting that their work is disrupted constantly or often by poor pupil behaviour. Looking at staff's feelings of safety, like we did previously with the pupils' feelings of safety, we ask 3 questions which relate to in the past 3 months, have you experienced any emotional or physical violence? So that's like bullying or threats, and we ask whether they've experienced this from students, family members, or members of staff, as 3 separate questions. What we see in that data is that staff are most likely to experience emotional or physical violence from a student. And 1 in 5 members of staff reported experiencing emotional or physical violence from a pupil. Is everybody able to hear me? I just seen in the chat we've got a comment about the sound. Is it all right? Cool. Another question that we ask in our staff report is how easy or difficult is it to get support with pupil behaviour? So as well as looking at the trends with experiencing disruption in the classroom, we also ask staff about the support surrounding behaviour and how readily available or how easy or difficult it is to get support with that pupil behaviour. In 2022, 2023, less than half of staff reported finding it easy or very easy to get support with pupil behaviour. And if we see from the graph, you can see that around 25%, so a quarter of staff reported finding it either difficult or very difficult getting support when it comes to pupil behaviour. So in our staff experience and wellbeing survey, we ask staff the question, in the past 3 months, how often have you considered resigning? One of the the response to that we had is 43% of all staff considered resigning sometimes, often, or constantly in 2022, 2023. In responses collected between May and December of 2022, 2023, since introducing the question, what has made you consider resigning, into the staff experience and wellbeing survey, pupil behaviour was the fourth most frequently reported reason for staff considering resigning, of those who had said they were considering resigning from the classroom. We also see things such as feeling undervalued, overwhelming workload, low staff morale in the workplace, poor work-life balance. But in relation to the report and the topic we're focused on today, pupil behaviour was the fourth most reported reason for those considering resigning. We did ask staff, Terry, in response to your question in the chat, we did ask staff what settings they worked in, but not to all. It's a question that not all respondents respond to. So the data does vary across those, but that is something we could look into in the future, sharing those insights. Sector knowledge sharing. So that is kind of the summary of some of the data that we have pulled together from the report, and the ones that I wanted to share with you specifically today on this webinar, as it's some of the points that when talking with Sam, he found particularly interesting in relation to what he'd seen in the sector. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to share the video of the interview. As you can appreciate, watching yourself back on video and listening to yourself speak is not very fun. So I will mute myself while I watch this, so you don't have to hear me again talking over while I'm talking. So it will just be a video that I'm going to quickly press play on now, that you can have a listen to the conversation that I had earlier this week with Sam from Dustin School. About the behaviour report that we've recently published. So when talking with Sam, he gave us he was also kind of to give us a quote on behaviour for when we launched our report, which was, "Poor behaviour is kryptonite to all that we seek to achieve in schools." And I think when we're listening to the interview with Sam, you appreciate that. I think that very much comes through in his kind of his attitude towards behaviour and the approach that the school has taken in response to that. So I'm going to share that with you now. Let me know if there's any problems with sound in the chat, and we can sort that out for you. We have Sam from Dunstan School with us today, principal at Dunstan School. So I will hand over to Sam to give a little intro about himself, and what we're going to do is we're going to have a chat with Sam this afternoon on some of the questions that we think would be really useful to those in the sector, and kind of, first of all, I would love to gather your thoughts on what you think of kind of the data from the report and things that we've learned, and how that reflects for you and resonates for you with your experience in school and practice.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. My name is Sam Strickland. I'm the principal of the Dustin School, which is situated in Northamptonshire. It's a 2,000 strong school, and we run from early years all the way through to post-16. So it's a giant all through school with 212 staff. I've been there nearly 7 years. When I took over at the school, behaviour was professionally interesting, and there was a lot of work that had to be done in and around behaviour. But we serve as a national behaviour hub lead school. So I really do have the privilege of being able to go up and down the country and work with other schools to support them in terms of culture, leadership, ethos, and behaviour. My overall background is actually I'm a history teacher by trade, who's kind of worked their way up through the ranks, and this is my second headship. So that's, I guess, kind of who I am. In terms of the survey and the kind of standout things for me, the bits that really kind of stuck out to me is the overall increase in classroom disruption since 2020. That's increased by about 12% according to the survey. Unsurprisingly, but worryingly at the same time, that nearly a fifth of teachers cite that they suffer from either emotional or physical violence and abuse in their kind of working practice. That really does stand out to my mind. Another statistic that really stuck out to me is that 42% of pupils felt that learning was disrupted either very often or quite often. So there's that, to my mind, says that there's a lot of disruption in lessons. And I've seen similar kinds of surveys that talk about loss of time, anywhere between 6 to 10 minutes in any given 30 minutes kind of spell in a secondary setting of learning being lost through poor behaviour in schools. But also some of the other bits that stood out to me, if I give you kind of two more, were that staff felt that they weren't able to readily get support or access support in the way that they needed from senior leaders. And then actually a disconnect where leaders seem to think that there's less of an issue than actually teachers and pupils themselves do in terms of behaviour. And that's a very interesting, I guess, difference in opinion, should we say.
Yeah, and I think that's something that really resonates in our residential by role report as well. The difference in priorities for different roles within schools, and that's quite an interesting read too to kind of have a look at if you want to follow up on those difference in trends for those. How specifically at Dustin School do leadership teams support the staff with behaviour?
Yeah, behaviour is actually front and centre of everything that we do, and I guess the natural mindset is to go to one of rules and sanctions and punitive sanctions. And actually what we take behaviour to be is everything. Behaviour is our culture, it is our ethos, it is our way in terms of how we do things, it's everything that we live and breathe, it's our character, values and virtues. So it's all part of our mindset as an establishment. From the point of view of leaders, and I take here pastoral middle leaders as well as the leadership team and myself, we have a large team that work around supporting staff with pastoral matters, with safeguarding and with behaviour, because they're kind of all enwrapped in one another. So every year group within the secondary phase, if I start with that and then I'll talk about the primary, is supported by an assistant director of year who doesn't teach and a director of year who does. And then every key stage is supported by assistant principals who act, I guess, in kind of simplistic terms, almost like deputy head teachers of a mini school. And then they're overseen strategically by a vice principal who is also on the ground as well. And the vice principal operates almost like as the head teacher of a mini school within this giant kind of mecca school, as it were. And that model runs in key stages 3, 4, and 5. From a primary phase perspective, your first port of call, because obviously there's a real difference here. You've got the same children all day, every day as the class teacher. They take, I guess, the first kind of wave of kind of priority in terms of dealing with behaviour. But then they're supported by phase leads, and then they're supported by the leadership team within the primary phase setting as well. And then kind of working around that is a layer of safeguarding staff, SEN staff, and then we have our own internalised alternate provision, which we call a positive impact centre. But ultimately, kind of, it's a very long-winded answer to your question, behaviour isn't responsibility of any one sole person. I think to schools that I've worked in before, and I've hot-housed this role as well myself, you have the behavioural lead, and somehow you've magically mothered or fathered 1,200, 1,500 pupils, and they're all your responsibility. And however much you could argue that a team will bail in and support you, everyone's got their own defined remits. Everyone has to kind of get on with their own role. We don't work that way as a school. It's a huge collective team effort that works around behaviour. Our view is very much, if behaviour isn't right, then everything isn't right. So that's our approach.
Because one thing you highlight there is obviously virtues in your school ethos. How has school ethos played a part in your schools in supporting behaviour?
Yeah, it's the underpinning driver ultimately that everything is built upon. So our values are resilience, respect, and aspiration, and every school's got a 3 or a 5 kind of snapshot of values that they, on paper, say they uphold and they're about. And some schools do that really, really well, to be fair. But it's part of our mindset, and we link all of our behaviours, for want of a better phrase, to our values, to our ethos. So our behaviour system, both in terms of sanctions and rewards, all funnel into our values and our ethos and our culture. So everything ultimately talks to one another. So So if I was to show really positive resilience, for argument's sake, as one of our values, then I might get rewarded through our house system. If, however, I'm disruptive and I'm distracting other pupils in a lesson, so I'm not really being resilient in terms of my learning, then I may well fall foul of the sanction system ultimately. But every opportunity that we get to speak to pupils, to narrate to them what we want, we do. So we start our school day with institutional lineups where we address the pupils outside, and effectively what that is by year group, an outdoor assembly is the easiest way to think about it. And then we dismiss the pupils with their tutors to go into the building and start tutor time. And what that allows for is actually a very calm and orderly start to the school day. And critically, from a safeguarding angle, you don't have 2,000 pupils who are unsupervised roaming around the corridors of the school, which is a safeguarding issue for any school. And then pupils engage in a very well structured, centrally planned tutor time. And that can transcend from the big reads before you leave Dustin. There's 15 books that we want our pupils to have read before they leave the school, through to a character session. So again, it's all about the overall roundedness of our pupils. Then through lesson and curriculum delivery, we ask staff to exemplify our character virtues with the pupils, and certain lessons lend themselves better to that than others, of course, due to the nature of what's actually being delivered in terms of the taught content. But where there is any opportunity to exemplify those character virtues, staff are promoted to do so. And it's part and parcel, ultimately, of everything that we do as a school. And what I would say to listeners is, if you'd like to come and see us in action, you're very welcome to do so.
And talking of other listeners, one of the things that I'd love for this is to kind of cover some basic advice for people that we've got. So what advice could you offer for schools that are finding behaviour particularly challenging? We can see that it's a trend that behaviour is becoming a challenge for the sector, and it's not an easy question, I appreciate, because there's no one answer to how to tackle it. But what would your advice be to those that are at the start of their journey and starting to consider, I need to make some changes, particularly around behaviour in schools?
I think that the first point, and what I'm about to kind of cite to you, is quite time consuming, and it will feel counterintuitive, because as a profession, I think we're a little bit hardwired, certainly as senior leaders, to go at 1,000 miles an hour with everything and think that we have to sort everything within 2 seconds. And sometimes that can actually be counterproductive. I think the first thing is actually to talk to people, to talk to staff, to talk to parents, to talk to pupils, what is going on within the school, and look at your data if you have data around this. But what are the patterns and trends? What are the behaviours that you're seeing exhibited that you don't want, of course, and then why? Why are they happening? And asking that really difficult question of people: why are children misbehaving? Is it a case or a question point that you've got a really complicated behaviour system? Is it a case that actually the enactment of the behaviour approach that you have as a school is ultimately really quite cumbersome and quite clumsy? And I think here, and I don't mean this disparagingly perhaps as it sounds, but I see some schools with S1 to S4 systems where you have warning, like an informal warning, a formal warning, a written warning, and then a sanction. And they sound intuitively like the right thing to do on paper, but then the practical application is one of teachers having to give, if 10 pupils are misbehaving in a lesson, potentially 30 warnings before any kind of sanction happens. And you get that throwback from children at times if you go straight to a detention of, but you didn't give me the preceding warnings to give me that detention. So where did that come from? And I think it's really important to speak to staff that, does the system that we have in place actually work, and is it fit for purpose? And is it a sustainable model that allows for positive behaviour? The other bit to do is to talk to pupils who actually are falling foul of the approach that you have. Because some of them, and I know there are different views here on why children misbehave, from unmet needs to SEN to it being a form of communication. And some people kind of refute the idea that kids are just kids. And I disagree with that kids are kids, and kids will make mistakes, but also kids will chance their arm, and they will look for cracks in behavior approaches and behavior systems. And children that actually do accrue lots of detentions for, as one potential outcome of poor behavior, if you spoke to them, would probably tell you why they're able to get away with it and where. And that's really useful intelligence and information to have at your disposal as well. And I think from there, once you've got that intelligence, you can then think very smartly about the approach that you want to take. But you've also got to take your time with that as well, because you've got to bring, and I think this is the key piece of advice here I'm going to give, you've got to bring people with you. You could easily in many schools change your behavior system and approach overnight, but if people haven't bought into it and won't uphold it and don't understand it and haven't been trained in it, then it will fall flat on its face. So you've got to give people time to understand, to question, to buy into it, but also yourself time to really train them, as in the staff and the pupils, so they know explicitly what it is that you want. And then I think once you've done those two bits, you then communicate to parents. Parents come last in kind of the domino rally effect, because they aren't in the school building day in, day out. They do need to know. I don't dispute that side of things, but they don't need to be your first port of call once you're making the changes that you're making. Because if anything, you're going to get throwback and challenge over things that haven't even got up and running. And parents kind of need to see the headlines of the benefits of the changes that you've made once those benefits are in place, and to understand the why you've brought those changes in. But I think they come last in your domino rally of bringing about change.
Amazing, thank you so much. One of the things that you really highlighted there was getting the buy-in from everybody in school, with the finding out from them first. And one of the resources we have on our website is the stakeholder feedback hub, which has, if you're unsure of ways to go about collecting that stakeholder feedback for the first time, one of the resources we have is a guide to how to set your goals and your targets using a feedback cycle. So for any listeners that are interested in having a look at stakeholder feedback, that's a really good resource that is available to kind of go through as well. Amazing. Thank you so much, Sam, for all of your advice and your time today to go through all of the kind of insights into Dustin School. It's been really insightful for us as well to hear about how our data looks and how that looks fit for you guys in schools. I really appreciate the time. We have Sam from Dunstan School. So that was the interview that we had with Sam earlier this week. I saw a couple of questions, Sam. I saw the one around how do you have routine, expectations, and consistency to stick with staff. I think Sam covered that quite well in that last section. Please let me know if you'd like to know more about how they do it specifically within Dustin, because I can definitely share that on. Feel free to email us at the end with the email if there's any further follow-ups to any responses that I give, because I can put those to Sam. He's happy for us to reach out to him and ask for some advice on specific questions that pop up within the webinar today. But yeah, he one thing that he really raises is getting that buy-in early on. So getting that input from staff and from pupils early on in the journey when creating and developing the new behaviour policy, so that you get that universal buy-in, because as he says, you need to take people with you when introducing those new policies. With those, one thing that I wanted to put out there now is it is a bit of an opportunity for some discussion amongst those who are in the webinar today, around the question: have you recently gathered any feedback from pupils, staff, or parents about behavioural safety? If so, kind of what did you find out? And I'd love for this to be an opportunity for those in the sector and in the webinar today to contribute and communicate with things that are going well within your school or your trusts relating to behaviour and safety, and how that's worked for you. So I'll give an opportunity now for any questions or examples on those. it might be that we have none, but if you have any other questions as well regarding the kind of things that we spoke through with Sam, or any of the data that I posed earlier, feel free to come off mic or to pop it in the chat. I'm happy to answer any questions that we've got in relation to that before we move on to the next section. Yeah, I think so, and you could see from Sam there in his one, they really value at Dustin School the getting input from those in the school surrounding behaviour and safety, prior to making any changes to it, just to do that analysis of understanding what the next steps looks like for the school, and to really get that buy-in across the team, but when developing those new policies and practices that you hope to see rolled out, and yeah, hopefully that aspires to then that consistency among team in implementing those as well. Well, moving on to the next bit now in the webinar. If you have any more questions, feel free to add them into the chat. I'll happily answer any that come in, or as I said, put them to Sam and get back to with answers with those. But what I'm going to do now is look at some of the possible resources that are out there to kind of support with developing of policies and practices within the sector, in relation to behaviour and safety. So we're going to be looking specifically at how we can create environments that promote better behaviour and safety for all. One of the things that I mentioned previously when in the interview with Sam, but one that Sam really highlights the value of is understanding the needs and the perspectives of those in your communities, so whether that be parents or pupils or staff. And one of the resources that we have on our website that's free to use and free to download is a PDF. That actually the stakeholder feedback hub, it has that resource on there with the cycle that helps to bring feedback into the school improvement journey, when setting goals or carrying out surveys, analysing results, and taking action. And it also highlights the need for that to be a continuous cycle of reviewing, and then continuing to do so. A lot of the do review cycle in those. I can see a comment in the chat, Joe, about discussing yesterday's hub stakeholders meeting regarding the impact of recruitment and retention of teachers, and how a range of voices need to work together to improve the impression of teaching as a career. Completely agree. I think it's a stakeholder feedback and inclusion of those within the school communities is massive, and it can have such an impact on the way schools are run, and like you said, having an impact on recruitment, retention of teachers, and making people feel that their voices are heard, and implement things like having a look through the stakeholder feedback hub, and how we recommend utilising that feedback that you take from those meetings, or the surveys or engagement that you have with those in your communities. It's a fantastic way of looking at how you can use that for school improvement on your journeys. Another of the resources that when speaking with Sam earlier this week, we were chatting about was some of the stuff that's put out there by the DFE, and the NAS UWT policy advice is very reflective of 8 principles that can underpin effective behaviour management, and also ways of informing behaviour management policies in schools. And it's got some great questions to ask yourself, and to ask those in your schools and trusts, of what you can do to develop a strong behaviour management plan within schools, or policy within schools. Another similar resource is that of the Education Endowment Foundation. They highlight some of the proactive or reactive measures that you can put into place in improving behaviour in schools. One thing that you can see applies again here, that has become a theme throughout the webinar, is that consistency is key. Like Sam was saying, it's about getting that buy-in to achieve that consistency, and using the opportunity for stakeholder feedback at the beginning of the journey of developing those strong behaviour policies or the behaviour practices in schools, and working on that consistency across all of the staff within the environment. And a final one, because it has come up as a theme within this webinar and through the report, that is pupil safeguarding, pupil wellbeing, staff safeguarding, staff wellbeing. It is a resource we recently shared in our pupil wellbeing webinar that we recently put on, but I feel it's really important to also include that here. It's the classroom wellbeing toolkit from Anna Freud. As you can see from some of the data that I shared with you today, that pupil and staff wellbeing is something that we should definitely pay attention to when considering behaviour policies. And the toolkit here from Anna Freud is definitely beneficial and useful for looking at how we can build those supportive environments for those in schools. So that is all I had planned for within the webinar today. Was thinking there'll be some more discussion, so I'm going to leave this as an opportunity now for those who, in the webinar today, to ask any questions about reflections on the webinar or any of the data that's been covered, or again, if you have any questions that you'd like me to put to Sam and to follow up on. We do have a couple of spotlights coming up over the next couple of months in relation to behaviour and best practice within the sector. So be sure to keep an eye on the resources that we have continuously coming out on our website, as I'm sure those will be really beneficial and supportive of those of you who at the start of the webinar were looking to build on existing practices, and we'll aim to share some of those best practices that we see within the sector with you in the form of blogs or spotlights or webinars in the future. If you don't have any questions for this evening, don't have any questions for this morning, but think later on, actually, there's something I wish I'd have asked on that webinar, please feel free to pop us an email. The communication links are on the screen at the moment with those, or feel free to reach out to myself. What advice does Sam have to get all staff engaged in all working together on behaviour? So I think one of the key points that Sam put across when communicating with him earlier this week was that the one thing that underpinned their behaviour practices when they first started the journey of reviewing what the current practice was, and their current policies and their current practices in school, was getting everybody involved to get staff engaged, asking them their opinions on how the behaviour practices were working, asking staff where they were noticing the challenges within school, particularly with behaviour, where they were noticing poor behaviour, which times of day they were noticing poor behaviour, and he spoke quite strongly on making sure that staff feel that those views are heard when you're designing the new policies and practices, or including those in trainings and sessions to help inform the rest of the team. So if you would like to want more from that, Amanda, feel free to pop us an email with anything you want me to ask Sam specifically about any of the trainings or things they've done with those. I'll be happy to kind of relate that to you. Question from Kaylee was how reasonable adjustments are implemented in the behaviour policy would be useful. Is that in relation to Sam? Would you like to know how they take into account for reasonable adjustments in their behaviour policies, for example? Fab. I will save that question now, and we'll ask Sam to that. Could you pop us an email to the hello@Adurio with that one, so we have your email address to get back to you on the response for that, and I'll definitely get back to you with a response for that from Sam. I myself don't know everything to do with Dustin School, but I will definitely try and get you an answer from Sam about how they best do that within the sector, or from some of our other schools within the sector as well. No, really grateful for those who all attended today. I hope it's been useful within with the context of our report and some of the tidbits and information from Sam. If there's anything else I could do to help, please feel free to pop us an email, or be sure to download the report for further insights on the behaviour, specifically around parents, because that's something we haven't covered within the webinar today. So if you want to find out more about the parents' perspectives relating to behaviour, please feel free to download the report using the link that was in the chat earlier.